Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Central Oregon. I'm Crystal McCubbin Masterson and I will be your worship host today. Joining us will be Will Hornyak, and he will be helping us to further explore the Soul Matters theme of story today. Our opening words come from Ursula Le Guin. Storytelling is dangerous to those who profit from the ways things are because it has the power to show that the way things are is not permanent, not universal, not necessary. Having that real, though limited power to put established institutions into question, imaginative literature has also the responsibility of power. The storyteller is the truth teller. We will not know our own injustice if we cannot imagine justice. We will not be free if we do not imagine freedom. We cannot demand that anyone try to attain justice and freedom who has not had a chance to imagine them as attainable. Our gathering song today is from singer and storyteller Carrie Newcomer. It's called You Can Do This Hard Thing.
There at the table with my head in my hands, a column of numbers I just did not understand. You said add these together, carry the two. Now you can do this hard thing. You can do this hard thing. It's not easy, I know, but I believe that it's so. You can do this hard thing. At a cold winter station, breathing into our gloves, it would change me forever, leaving for God knows what. You carried my bags, you said I'll wait for you. You can do this hard thing. You can do this hard thing. It's not easy, I know, but I believe that it's so. You can do this hard thing. Late at night I called and you answered the phone. The worst it had happened and I did not want to be alone. You quietly listened, you said we'll see this through. You can do this hard thing. You can do this hard thing. It's not easy, I know, but I believe that it's so. You can do this hard thing. Breathless and pressed in hard times, hearts hung like laundry on backyard clotheslines. Impossible just takes a little more time. From the muddy ground comes a green volunteer in a place we thought barren. new life appears. Morning will come whistling some comforting tune for you. You can do this hard thing. You can do this hard thing. It's not easy, I know, but I believe that it's so. You can do this hard thing.
Hi, I'm Jazz Halberstadt, and this is my mama, Noreen Halberstadt, and she'll be lighting our chalice. Can you hear them? Can you hear the whispers of the ancestors? We remember. Their stories are in these walls, in our bones, in the air that we breathe. Their stories are in the touch of a calloused hand, in the melody of songs that we hum while washing dishes, in remembered faces. We hear the whispers of the ancestors, how their stories touch our lives and call us into becoming. By Lynn Gardner.
You're on, Crystal, for Spirit of Life next.
Okay. I just didn't see myself spotlighted. Sorry.
Oh, you are on.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for that. Our Spirit of Life song response today comes from All Souls in Washington, D.C., and the opening verse will be in Spanish.
Oops, I thought I had unmuted, sorry. Hi, so I'm Chayla Sloper, your Congregational Life Facilitator with today's announcements. Firstly, a very warm welcome not only to our guest speaker, Will Hornyak, but to all those who are joining us from places close and far. Let us know that you're visiting with us when we have our Joys and Sorrows chat later on. And if you'd like to sign up for our weekly communications, we have a virtual visitor form that you can fill out. Let us know that you're here, and then also sign up for our emails. As Crystal was saying, this month's theme is story. So we have many opportunities throughout the month and woven through our weekly email to reflect on stories around us and the stories that arise within us as well. So a few things. The most important thing to mark on your calendar is the UUFCO annual meeting, which will be Sunday, May 23rd. And so all members are strongly encouraged to attend, and everyone else is welcome as well. Speaking of membership, we're really happy to announce that we have welcomed new members into UUFCO within the last month. And also this Wednesday, I highly recommend an opportunity that is being offered by one of my colleagues among membership professionals, Laura Park, who is at the Unity Fellowship it's a Unitarian Universalist congregation, but their name is Unity in the St. Paul area. She'll be talking about membership. It's a Zoom this Wednesday at 11 o'clock. And I just find her to be one of the most remarkably wise and poetic, evocative speakers. And she'll be talking about membership and looking at it in terms of within, among, and beyond. So look for that in the weekly email, in the all congregational email. So if you've been curious about our ongoing decisions about COVID guidelines and whether we'll be meeting together and when and all of that, the COVID task force has their guidelines. They're posted on the website and they're also available in the weekly email. So just want to remind you of that. Okay, so this week on Friday, the Environmental Justice Group invites you to a conversation about the wonderful book, Braiding Sweetgrass, which is written by a Native American botanist who weaves together a beautiful love for the earth and a receptivity to the teachers that we find in nature, and also incorporating scientific insights as well. So that's this Friday night at 6 p.m. Also, there is this coming Tuesday, the Women's Connections Tea and Sustenance conversation will be at 6 p.m. So that should be a really nice time to meet with the other women. There's an RSVP on the website. Next, a week from tomorrow night, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Group invites you to the Courageous Culture Conversation. That'll be at 5:30 p.m. And one really exciting new announcement is that at the end of June, our art resources team invites us to an open patio, art on the patio. And if you are an artist and would like to submit art, you can submit what you'd like to bring to the art show to Christina Ziegler, and her email address is hummingbird@bendcable.com. Deadline for receiving those submissions is June 7th. So there's a lot going on, and even though we have clouds today, we look for warmer weather this week, but wherever you are, blessings on your day.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here with you today. I really appreciate the invitation to share some stories. There's a saying in Ireland among storytellers that there is no such thing as a story without an ear to hear it and a heart to hold it. So thank you for lending an ear and a heart to these tales today. I loved the song that Crystal chose about "You Can Do This Hard Thing," and I think we've all been doing some hard things in this past while. But here's a story from the Mayan folk tradition of southern Mexico and Guatemala about doing a hard thing, and how oftentimes in difficult times we overlook certain aspects of ourselves. This is a story about, it's important to remember the wee small voice that speaks inside us. They say that long ago there was a village, a Mayan village, and a wildfire broke out there, and the fire was out of control. It was burning the huts of the villagers. It burned the fields of the corn and the beans and the tomatoes, and the people had to flee. They had to run from these flames. But as they looked back, someone said, si por lo menos, if at least podemos recoger, we could recover unos de las semillas, some of the seeds, of the frijole and the maíz and the tomatoes, the corn, the beans, the tomatoes, we could at least replant our crops. And in that way, we would have our strength to rebuild our village. And everybody said, sí, es una buena idea. Now that's a good idea. And someone said, pero quién va a recoger las semillas? Who's going to recover the beans, from the fire? And they say, nadie habló. No one spoke. There was a silence until this little voice spoke up. This little voice says, yo me voy. Yo sé dónde quedan las semillas. I will go. I know where the seeds are. And everybody looked down to see this little un pajarito color de lodo, a little mud-colored bird, this tiny little bird. And they laughed. And someone said, you could barely fly to the top of a cornstalk, let alone into that raging fire. But as the people laughed, this little bird flew up, disappeared into the smoke and the flame and the heat. And the people waited and waited and waited, but the bird didn't return. They went to sleep. All went to sleep except one young boy who waited and waited and waited. And at last, with first light, he called out. He said, mira, look. And sure enough, this little mud-colored bird returned. And right at his feet dropped some of the seeds of the beans, the frijoles. And then flew back into the fire, came back with seeds of tomatoes. Flew back and came back again with the seeds of the maíz, the corn. But it was badly burned. There was ash all over it. And the boy took it and cared for this little bird. And in time, the people took those seeds, they replanted, and with the good earth and with the sun and the rains, the crops returned, the people had their strength, and in time they rebuilt the village. And when that was done, there was a great ceremony that was made. And everybody gathered around this small bird. Dances were danced, and poems were spoken, praise songs were made. But finally, a shaman, an old elder, came out, a medicine woman, and she spoke to the bird. And she said, you are the smallest among us, and yet you have the largest of hearts. You will now appear on the outside as you are on the inside. And everybody watched. They watched as this bird began to change its shape and color. Suddenly its tail feathers grew long and silken, bright green, the same color of the ripe leaves of corn in summer. Its beak protruded. It was golden now, the same color as the ripe ears of corn. And at last its breast feathers grew and grew till they were fiery red, the same color as that fire, the flames of the fire. And from that day to this, the little mud-colored bird has been known as the Quetzal, the most beloved and sacred bird to the Mayan people. And that is the story of how the Quetzal received its great feathers and how it became so beloved. But it's also the story of how the smallest among us and the smallest voices among us sometimes are the ones that can help us get through the most difficult of times. So we thank the Mayan people for that story of wisdom, the ancestors there, and thank all of you for listening to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Will, for that story for our Time for All Ages today. And will you please join me in a moment as we say our children's covenant together? In this place, I am kind In this place, I am loving. In this place, I am a friend to the earth and all animals and people. In this place, I am loved. So I'd like to wish the mothers happy Mother's Day, and everyone happy Mother's Day in the sense of honoring the divine feminine within you and the earth. Mothers can be dicey, being one myself, having one myself, but I hope you'll find some joy in your day around that. So you may be full of joy this morning, or you may be carrying a heavy burden. This is a time that we have the opportunity to share what is in our hearts and to connect with the community that is gathered. The chat box will be open in a moment for sharing our joys and sorrows. And we'll have lovely accompaniment like we get to from Peggy. So Will Hornyak is a storyteller who can weave a wide web of stories, poems, and lore. Will has been a featured storyteller at the National Storytelling Festival and at numerous regional festivals around the U.S. Will's been with us before, and I'm so grateful that he can join us again today as we explore the theme of story. Welcome, Will.
Great. Thank you so much, Crystal. It's great to be here. I was hoping to consider this theme of dream keeping today and the power of imagination, especially during difficult times, especially when the outer world seems so filled with fear, anger, mistrust, and distrust. How do we deal at such times? And I was reminded of a great teacher from Africa, Burkina Faso, Malidoma Somé, who once said, you can't solve the problems of this world if you always stay in this world. You need to go to the other realms to find inspirations and ideas from the ancestors. And the ancestors are represented, of course, by people, but also the ancestors are represented by poems and myths and prayers and tales. Because you might say dreams, stories, poems, songs, those are sometimes considered emissaries of the imagination, with which we can refresh ourselves and bring back new ideas and ways of healing and seeing things anew. So I wanted to share a story from Ireland. I'm part Irish descent. Actually, my mother was all Irish, so I've always been connected to the Irish storytelling tradition. And long ago, in a little village in County Roscommon, which was called Ballahidreen. It's kind of a mouthful, Ballahidreen. There was a man who lived there. He was a peddler. He was a very poor peddler, but a very kind-hearted man. And every day he would put this sack on his back, and the peddler of Ballahidreen would wander the rocky roads of County Roscommon. And as any peddler would, whenever he came to a square, a fair, a crossroads, anywhere where people gathered, a marketplace, he would spread out his wares. And he would call out, pots and pans for sale, knives and needles, ribbons and bows, come and buy them here, come and buy them here. Well, you know how it is. Oftentimes it'd be a boy, like 10-year-old boy that would come up and find something among the peddler's goods, a pocket knife or something, and pick it up and say, peddler, how much for this? And the peddler, he would look and he would know right away if that boy could afford the knife. He often peddled among very, very poor people. And oftentimes, if he assumed the boy couldn't afford the knife, he would say something like, lad, you know that knife, that pocket knife you got in your hand there? Now, for some reason, that knife has been doing nothing but weighing me down for months. You know, in fact, I've been looking for somebody to take it off my hands just to lighten my load a little bit. Why would you do that for me? And the boy would look up, he'd say, I would, sir. And he would take the knife and he'd go running off and he would be so bloody happy. And the peddler of Ballahidreen would take a bit of that happiness for his payment. Well, he gave away a lot more than he sold, you see. And of course, who would notice this but the townspeople? Now, if I could see you all, what I would have you do is be the townspeople. You have to fold your arms like this and shake your heads like that, you know. And the townspeople would cry out. And they'd say, aye, look at that old peddler. He's nothing but a fool. And the fool and his money are soon parted. He gives away more than he sells. And of course, the townspeople were right. When the peddler of Ballahidreen made his way home, he was often followed by stray dogs. And most people would shoo dogs like that away, but the peddler always stopped. And he would reach into his sack and he'd take out some old bread or some cheese and he would feed these dogs and then make his way home, where he lived at the crossroads near the village of Ballahidreen. He lived in a tiny mud and wattle hut, the cheapest kind, but outside of his hut, he had a beautiful, well-tended garden. And in the middle of that garden, there grew a beautiful cherry tree. And everybody in County Roscommon and beyond, they knew that for some reason, the peddler's cherries, they were bigger, riper, sweeter, just more beautiful than any cherry you could find. Everybody knew that. And nobody knew it better than the blackbirds, you see. And wouldn't they come swooping out of the skies? And they'd eat up half of the cherries. And rabbits would come out of the copses, you know, the fields, and they'd munch away on the peddler's potatoes and his carrots. And the neighbors, they'd call out, they'd say, peddler, man, shoo the thieving critters away. They're robbing you blind. And he'd say, there's nothing robbing me. Nothing sings as sweetly as a bird in that tree of mine. And the rabbits are good company. You know, I get lonely sometimes. But they'd say, peddler, someday you'll have nothing to peddle and you'll have nothing to eat. And you know what the neighbors were? right. There came a winter when the snow came early and it stayed late. And finally, the peddler of Ballahadreen had nothing to peddle and nothing to eat. And every night he went to bed cold and hungry and cold. And you know, if you've ever done that for a while, you're bound to have an amazing dream. And the peddler, didn't he dream in the middle of the night that he saw standing right at the foot of his bed, Saint Patrick himself? And Saint Patrick said to the peddler in the dream, he said, "Peddler, get up now. Walk to the town of Dublin and find the Liffey Bridge and stand on the bridge, and you'll see what you're to see and you'll hear what you're to hear. Now, man, get up and go." Well, you know, fool that he was, he listened to the dream and he got up in the middle of a cold night, put on a thin rag of a coat he had, walked out the door, and it was just so cold. He couldn't, he turned it back to the house and he went back to sleep. But the next night, St. Patrick appeared again. And he said, "Peddler, I'm telling you, man, you've got to get up. Find your way to Dublin, find the Liffey Bridge and stand there. You'll hear what you're to hear. Now get up and go." And that night the peddler did. He got out the door and down the road, but he was just so hungry and weak, he couldn't do it. He went back to sleep. But of course, St. Patrick appeared a third night. And he said, "Man, I'm telling you, and I won't be telling you ever again, you've got to get up, find your way to Dublin, find the Liffey Bridge and stand there." And the peddler, he managed to get up. He managed to walk out the door and down the road, but he was so cold and he was so hungry, but he just did it anyway. He put one foot in front of the other day upon day. It took him 3 days to walk all the way to Dublin. But didn't he find the Liffey Bridge? He found it and he stood in the middle of the bridge just as the sun was coming up. And the peddler had never seen the city before, and he was watching now and waiting and listening as people walked this way across the bridge and that way across the bridge. And all day long he listened and waited and watched as they walked to the fairs and then the marketplaces and the shops and here and there. And he listened and waited and watched and waited and listened and watched and waited and watched and listened and listened. And no one said a word to him. No one said one word to the peddler of Ballahadreen. And finally, at the end of the night, as the sun set and the breeze blew cold, he was afraid because he knew he didn't have the strength to walk all the way back to Ballahadreen. In fact, he only had the strength to walk off the bridge and to find an alley that was sheltered from the breeze, and he laid down there. And just as his head touched the cold cobblestones, he was asleep. And that was to be the final sleep of the peddler of Ballahadreen. Well, had not someone come around the corner at that time, you see. That's called a pregnant pause, you see. Some people just call it a cheap storytelling trick, but yeah. You see, the person who came around the corner just happened to be the innkeeper, who had an inn at the foot of the Liffey Bridge. Just happened to be the innkeeper who'd been watching the peddler all day long on this bridge. And finally he saw him there. He says, "Well, now that's where you've come to. I wondered what happened to you. I've been watching you out my window all day long, standing on the Liffey Bridge in a stiff breeze. You weren't peddling anything. You weren't begging for anything. What on earth were you doing there, man? Tell me, how is it with you?" But the peddler, he was too weak. He couldn't even talk. The innkeeper noticed that. He said, "You come with me, man. You come with me." And didn't the innkeeper take the peddler of Ballahadreen to his inn? He sat him down at a table. He served him a pint. He gave him a bowl of stew. And the peddler ate the best meal he'd eaten in months. And when he finished, the innkeeper said, "Now I've satisfied your hunger. You can satisfy my curiosity. How is it with you, man? What were you doing on the bridge all day long?" The peddler was a bit embarrassed. And he said, "Well, you see, I had this dream, and in my dream, you see, this voice, it said, and without even listening to the end of the tale, the innkeeper just laughed. He said, "Man, look at yourself. Look at yourself. You're a bag of bones, and you're daft, running off when some voice in a dream tells you to." Man, I don't know who you are. I don't know where you live, but I know this much. You've got to get home and care for yourself, man. You can't go running off when some voice in a dream tells you to. The peddler of Balahadreen thanked the innkeeper for saving his life. He thanked him for his hospitality. And he got up, and just as he was making his way out the door, the innkeeper said, but wait a minute, wait a minute, man. You know, that dream of yours, it reminds me, I had a dream years ago. In fact, in my dream, St. Patrick himself spoke to me. And he said something like, innkeeper, he said, get up. Middle of a cold winter night, imagine I should get up and walk to the town of Balahadreen, wherever that is. And he said, there, you'll see at a crossroads a mud and wattle hut and a cherry tree growing there. And if you were to dig beneath it, you'd unearth a great chest of gold. Now, where would I be? An innkeeper, a man of means, if I listened to nonsense like that? Well, the peddler said, I don't rightly know where you'd be. But to himself, he said, I sure know where I should be. Didn't the peddler of Balahadreen make his way home in 2 days and 2 nights? Didn't he find his own shovel just leaning against his own hut? And didn't he take it? And right in his own front yard, beneath his own spreading cherry tree, he dug, and sure enough, he hit something. He brushed away the dirt, and he unearthed a huge wooden chest. And when he opened it, it brimmed full of pure gold Spanish doubloons. They say that all the good and the fine and the grand things that peddler did for this world with the gold, that is the stuff of 100 stories. And I know for a fact, all of them, just like this one, you see, they finally do come to an end, you know. And that's the end of the tale known as The Peddler of Balahadreen, County Roscommon, Ireland. And that's the tale. And so a couple things that I love about that tale is I think that one of the truths about it, and of course that story is versions of it are told in many, many different cultures. There's the Jewish version, the English version, this is the Irish version. But in all of them, it seems that we human beings have to get into dire straits or difficult predicaments. Somehow the outer world has to get very hard, confused, before the inner life cracks open. And when it does, the information that follows can be an important vision. Sometimes it'll come through a dream. Sometimes it'll come from some information given to someone by someone who doesn't even believe in dreams, you know. But I say that especially in difficult times, sometimes it is the inner life. It is the imaginal world that will offer us important insights. Another thing too is it's important to recognize that to dream is human. We all have dreams. But there's a big difference between having a dream and living out a dream, because there's great risk involved, you see. And of course, the peddler, he somehow sensed that. You know, even though there was a great opportunity, he was cold. Even though there was a great opportunity, he was hungry. He was weak. And yet, just as the folk song that Crystal Chose said earlier, he realized he could do the hard thing. He could put one foot in front of the other and eventually arrive to Dublin. And even then, it was a dicey circumstance. And finally, it's important to realize that in difficult times, good information can come from anywhere. We often know we're on a journey, sometimes called the hero's journey, or sometimes simply called an initiatory experience, when we realize that everyone around us can provide useful information and sometimes essential information for us. Well, another aspect I'd like to touch upon about the importance of imaginal thinking and dream keeping at such times is that I've noticed that when there's so much anger, fear, distrust, and mistrust in the world, we can, I know for myself, speak too quickly. We can arm ourselves too quickly, either with guns or opinions. And how do we disarm? How do we create a truce? How do we create some space so we can look away from the the problem and the conflict and the difficulty to see something different. And I was reminded of an old legend from China. And in this particular era, the monks were training in martial arts at many of the monasteries just so they could defend themselves from attack. And many of these monasteries in remote regions of China became quite famous for teaching kung fu and other martial arts. And among the monasteries, there was a custom of hospitality. Any wandering student of the martial arts or any teacher could always find hospitality at any other monastery, so long as that teacher or student was willing to spar with the master of that monastery. And in doing so, each student would teach what he knew from his particular teacher. It was a way of sharing ideas, sort of like a wandering scholar program. Well, it just so happened, though, that one night, cold winter night, the wind was blowing, the snow was falling, and in one of the most remotest of these monasteries, there came a knock at the gate. And the particular monk guarding the gate that night opened it up to see this old man all bent over. And he said, I seek a roof over my head. I seek a morsel of food for tonight. I am a wandering storyteller, a teller of tales, and I ask for a bit of hospitality. And the monk, he said, I'm sorry, grandfather, but you see, we only allow hospitality to the teachers and the students of martial arts. And even then, they have to spar with our master at dawn to show what they have learned. And the storyteller said, I am familiar with those martial arts. Please allow me in. Well, the monk, he was a bit skeptical because after all, it was a storyteller. But against his better judgment, he welcomed in the old man. He gave him a place to sleep that night, but sure enough, at dawn, they awoke the storyteller from his slumber, and dawn is pretty early for a storyteller. And they ushered him out. They ushered him out into the courtyard, the open courtyard. And already there stood 30 monks with these tight black robes on, their hair pulled back, and their eyes fixed upon him as he was ushered into the middle of the circle there. And not long after that, the master of that particular monastery appeared before him, and he bowed. He said, welcome. It is our custom to spar, but we always allow the guest to strike the first blow. You may proceed. And the storyteller, he bowed and he said, I thank you for the hospitality you have offered to me, and also the opportunity to spar with you on this morning. And then, to everybody's surprise, the storyteller, he closed his eyes. He closed his outer eyes, and yet his inner eyes, they opened, and he found some image, some scene that delighted him. And when he had, you could see the smile come to his face slowly. And then he smiled and he opened his eyes and he held this master of the martial arts firmly in a soft, loving gaze. And he was silent for a long time. He was silent until the very air in the courtyard and everyone in the courtyard just seemed to relax, to feel a sense of ease and spaciousness. And then the storyteller said, long ago, there was a monk who wore a brilliant orange robe. As he threaded his way through a scented pine forest, and the morning mist rose as he came to the base of a great green mountain, and there was a crystal clear pond through which yellow fish swam. He knelt to it. He put his hands into the cold waters and cupped the water and brought it to his mouth, and he drank. And as he did, the caw of a crow, it broke the early morning silence. And then he heard something rustling in the brush beside him. And the master of martial arts cried out and said, stop, enough. He turned to his students. Do you see what this storyteller has done? He has broken my concentration. He took me worlds away. He could have killed me with a feather. Offer to him hospitality. Let us learn what he has to teach us. And he is welcome at this place at any time. So I tell that story in part because to me, it's just a simple metaphor for how do we create space? How do we relax? How do we offer a way to see things just a little differently? And sometimes, as we know, stories, poems, songs, the life of the imagination can disarm, right? Can provide at least some measure of awe and beauty. And as I was thinking about this day, I was reminded of a scene, one of my favorite scenes from a movie, Shawshank Redemption. Probably many of you have seen it. But there's a time when Andy barricades himself into the room which has control of the loudspeaker over the prison yard. And he plays a song. It's an aria, the most beautiful aria from opera. And it's almost like this singing angel has flown over the prison yard. And it's so utterly beautiful that no one can do anything. They just stop, they look up, they wonder what happened. And it is that kind of beauty, that kind of awe that can arrest us and can actually change the very shape of our thought and our feeling. It's something that we don't consider sometimes, especially when times are difficult and we have a tendency to want to change everything on the outside. But sometimes it is that small voice, sometimes it is that image, sometimes it is that expression of beauty that can make such a difference. So those are the stories to share, but I did want to finish with a poem on this particular day. One of the ways I think about Mother's Day is that we are mothered by many, many, many people and mothered by many places and things in our lives. And to me, one of the places that has mothered many of my dreams and visions and stories has been the beauty of this place where I live in Oregon. And years ago, I wrote a little love poem to Oregon, which I called Ode to Lady Topophilia. And Topophilia simply means love of place, right? And this is my little love poem on this particular day to Gaia, to the great earth goddess, but specifically to Oregon, called Lady Topophilia. Lady Topophilia, Oregon, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love your rugged, rocky, curvaceous, crooked river canyon country. I swoon at the scent of your John Day River country junipers, your Oahe sagebrush perfume, your Ochiko mountain summer pines sap. But is there anything lovelier than the scent of your Willamette Valley lilac in springtime, planted in dark alluvial soils? But Lady Topophilia, I love even the odoriferous aromas you wear at low tide beneath dark Columbia River wharves at Astoria, where mammoth-sized sea lions sprawl over themselves, barking and howling and singing off-key like drunken sailors, while offshore, wind-whipped winter rains and deadly ocean sea swells keep sailors and fishermen anchored safely in bar rooms from Warrenton to Brookings, shooting pool, swapping lies over shots and beers. Lady Topophilia, when I roam far from my Milwaukee, Oregon home, I am not truly home until I have made a pilgrimage to your Willamette River shores. Not until I breathe in again that heady concoction of rotten cottonwood leaf mulch, goose poop, muck, and mud. Not until I intrude upon the solitude of a great blue heron and send it winging ponderously towards Willamette Falls, beneath whose waters enormous sturgeons still swim, where Clackamas Chinook villagers once fished and grew plump on eel, steelhead, salmon, sturgeon, and shad for 4,000 years, 4,000 years. But Lady Topophilia, who could forget the nights when moonlight gleamed upon your black basalt columnar outcroppings far above and far below your Deschutes River waters whispered, murmured to me, and then broke free, wild, ecstatic through White Horse, Buckskin Mary and Wapanesha Rapids undulated past rolling Sherman and Morrow County hills, cloaked in your gown of white winter wheat. Lady Topophilia, I admire how generously your Columbia waters lift and convey tugboats and massive wheat and potato laden barges, fishing boats, sailboards on bright waters above, and how below your dark currents still remember, still trace and caress that mother lode of salmon runs, Celilo Falls, now buried and still beneath dammed waters, where your voice once sang out in 100 full-throated choir of cataract and waterfalls and mixed and mingled with the songs of Cayuse and Chinook, Nez Perce, Tenino, Umatilla, Shoshone, Wasco, Yakima, and more for millennia. Lady Topophilia, you are ancient, storied, and ever new. From the fertile womb of your Tillamook Bay tidelands to sunburned Steens Mountain, lush blues, and Alver desert sands. From remote Imnaha and Basque and Rome to south winds of Port Orford to pastoral Sweet Home. You are the dew-lipped maiden, the ripe summer fruit, the wise autumn crone, and the wild screeching winter hag. And I am your most ardent admirer. Goddess of this land and muse of my heart, my love for you never, ever tires. And that's a little love poem to Oregon called Lady Topophilia. So again, I thank you all for helping me bring these stories to life, because as I said before, I always consider the real work of storytelling as what's going on in the imagination of the audience, and what we do in storytelling, we do together. So thank you for helping me bring these stories to life this morning. And thank you for the generous invitation. I so appreciate the Unitarian communities in that they have what I call a permeable membrane. They bring people in and out and allow us to participate with you in your community. And especially at these times, that is such a generous and courageous and fine thing to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, Peggy. Our closing song today is Everything Possible, hymn number 1019. The words will be in the chat. Our YouTube video comes from two singers from the Unitarian Church of Vancouver, BC.
We have cleared off the table, the leftovers saved, washed the dishes and put them away. I have told you a story and tucked you in tight at the end of your knockabout day. As the moon sets its sails to carry you to sleep over the midnight sea, I will sing you a song no one sang to me. May it keep you good company. You can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. There are kids who grow up strong and bold. There are others quiet and kind. Some race on ahead, some follow behind. Some go in their own way and time. Some women love women, some men love men, some raise children, some never do. You can dream all the day, never reaching the end of everything possible for you. Don't be rattled by names, by taunts, by games, but seek out spirits true. If you give your friends the best part of yourself, they will give the same back to you. You can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know I will love you still. You can live by yourself, you can gather friends around, you can choose one special one. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. The love you leave behind when you're done.
At the end of our service today, there will be a slide showing how you can make an offering to sustain and support the work of our fellowship. And I invite you to join us for our coffee hour breakout rooms following our service today. If you have lit a chalice in your home, please extinguish it now as we say our covenant together. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
There we go. For final benediction, Crystal asked if I would do the benediction, which reminded me of my Catholic upbringing. So I was going to do it with robes and do it all in Latin and swing incense, but I decided against that. So I'll just say this. We give thanks for the stories, the prayers, the poems, the dreams of this morning, and how they nourish the four most important bones of the human body. The funny bone to give us levity and humor, the backbone to help us stand up straight, strong, and do what we need to do, the wishbone to keep our hopes and dreams and visions alive, and the small hollow bone through which the Great Spirit moves into us and out of us into this world. And for the discussion time today, I'll leave you with a couple of questions. One, in the spirit of considering dream keeping in the life of the imagination. Have you ever made a decision in your life based in some part on a dream you had, or a vision you had, or even a premonition or a daydream. And the second one is a much more general question. Where did you find yourself in the stories? Is there any particular part of the stories that I told that interested you? Sometimes that could just be a character or a scene or a line that was spoken or perhaps a theme, but any way that you can speak to that on a personal level. So I offer that as just some food for thought. Thank you all.